Hey everyone, this is Dr. B. We're getting started on the lab Meiosis in Gizmos. It's actually called Meiosis in Gizmos because it's about a cat. We're looking at a problem with calyx. We're looking at genetic traits and defining phenotype and trait and phenotype. So to get started on the lab, you want to log into Clever. And then you're going to want to go to Gizmos, and to get Gizmos going, you're just going to want to launch Meiosis. It's meiosis in cats, so it's a cute way of saying meiosis in cats, Meiosis. I'm going to mute the music here. We're going to look at genetic disorders. We're a geneticist, someone who studies genetics, and we happen to be working at a veterinary office. Genetic refers to anything that's passed down between parents and offspring. So a genetic disorder is any condition that has been passed down from parents to their offspring. We can just click the X here. A pet and her cat have just arrived. Click the owner to hear her concerns. Hello, doctor. This is my male calico cat, Calyx, who has white, orange, and black fur. My veterinarian told me that calico cats are usually female and male cats only have this fur color when there is a genetic disorder. I'd like to know how this may affect Calyx's health. That seems like a legitimate concern. She's concerned that Calyx has a genetic disorder that may that affects his coloring, but may also affect other health issues. So, history: Calyx, he's 3 years old, he's 18 pounds, so he's a little bit overweight. He's a male. His fur color is orange, white, and black, which is only supposed to occur in females. Let's investigate here. Genetic diseases are caused by genetic mutations. To find out if Calyx has a genetic mutation, let's start by reviewing the genetics manual. So we're going to go over to the handbook here, and we're going to learn a little bit more. This is Coco, a different cat, with green eyes, a long tail, and short hair. These observable characteristics, anything we can see, is called a phenotype. So if we can see it, it's a phenotype. Eye color, tail length, and hair color are example of traits. A trait is any characteristic can be inherited, passed down from parents. The phenotype is the version of the trait we can see. So let's go back over to our sheet here, our lab sheet, and let's look at the first couple questions. What's the problem with Calyx the cat? Well, he's orange and black and white, and that coloring is only supposed to occur in females. Calyx is a male. What are genetic traits? Well, they're characteristics, not necessarily observable, that are inherited from your parents. For example, a genetic disorder might not be observable, but it is a genetic trait. Phenotype are genetic traits we can see, like hair color, tail length, nose shape in humans, all that sorts of things, whether you have freckles or not, your skin color, those are all phenotypes. In peas, it's whether you have purple flowers or white flowers. What's the difference between trait and phenotype? Trait, you can't always see. It is inherited, but it's not always observable. Phenotype is something that you can observe. What is the difference between a gene and a chromosome? That's coming up. Explain what a homologous chromosome is. That's also coming up. So we're going to be looking for these pictures. These are screenshots. We're also going to be looking for the difference between genotype and phenotype, using the word allele in our explanation, and there are a couple key concepts coming up about genotype and phenotype. So we'll be keeping an eye out for the answers for 5 through 9 as we go through here. So parents give their offspring their traits to the offspring by passing down DNA. This means that children develop a similar phenotype to their parents. Doesn't necessarily mean it's exactly the same, but it's somewhat similar. DNA is found in the nucleus of every cell. So let's zoom in here. So there's a nucleus. They're not always that big. DNA in the nucleus is organized into a smaller piece of DNA called a chromosome. We have 23 different pieces of DNA called chromosomes as humans. Cats have a few less, have fewer chromosomes. The number of chromosomes can be different between species. For example, humans have 46 chromosomes. That's 2 times 23, but cats only have 38. Let's pull the chromosomes out of this cell. And we can see if we count, there are 19 pairs of chromosomes here in Calyx's cells, or any cat cells for that matter. Chromosomes are arranged in pairs, and Coco has 19 pairs of chromosomes. One set of chromosomes comes from the mother, that's maternal chromosomes, and the other comes from the father, the paternal chromosomes. You can see that the Y here in the sex chromosomes on number 19 here, the Y came from dad, which makes sense because fathers either contribute a Y or an X. If they contribute a Y, the offspring will be XY and be male. If the fathers contribute an X, the offspring will be female because XX is female. Remember that chromosomes are made out of DNA. That means that chromosomes contain genes for an organism. So genes are made of DNA. They're part of a chromosome. So genes are just part of a chromosome that does something specific. They either code for a protein or turn on and off another gene. One pair of chromosomes called sex chromosomes contain the genes that determine the sex of an animal. The rest of the chromosomes are called autosomes. So sex chromosomes are this pair, and the rest are autosomes. They're for the body. They're not for the reproductive structures. Each pair of autosomes has the same genes. These are called homologous chromosomes. So basically, these are the same gene, not necessarily exact copies of each other because one came from mom, one came from dad. They can have different alleles. Alleles are versions of a gene like black fur or orange fur. So they're both chromosome number 12 or number 13, but they aren't always exactly the same. Homologous chromosomes have the same gene, but each gene can have different alleles. 2 alleles work together to make the phenotype. So here we have 2 green eye color alleles that make up Coco's green eye phenotype. So he has green on one homologous chromosome and green on the other. So Coco here has green eyes. We could drag and drop 2 blue-eyed chromosomes here. And if we have 2 blue alleles here, we get blue eyes. I don't know if there's an intermediate. So an organism may have more than 20,000 genes, and each gene may have multiple alleles. The combination of alleles in an organism is called its genotype. And you can't always tell the genotype from the phenotype. Phenotype are what we see and remember from peas. If we have dominant and recessive alleles in the same organism, we'll only see the dominant allele. So here's a key concept. An individual's genotype is made of the alleles inherited from both parents. I bet you need to know this. An individual's genotype is made out of what inherited from both parents? We just looked at that. Let's go back here for a second. What's the difference between a gene and a chromosome? Remember, we talked about part of a chromosome that codes for a specific protein or does a specific job is a gene. It's just part of that chromosome. It's made out of DNA and it has a specific job. A homologous chromosome is a copy. It's the same chromosome, but it's not exactly the same. It's not an exact copy. One comes from mom, the maternal chromosome. One comes from dad, the paternal chromosome. And together they make homologous chromosomes. They may have different alleles. Allele, remember, is a different version of a gene. For example, my dad has blue eyes, but my mom has brown. So their alleles for eye color are probably a bit different. Explain the difference between genotype and phenotype. Use the word allele in your definition. Well, calyx's phenotype is orange and black and white. That's what we can see. So phenotype is what we can see. We don't know calyx's genotype, and you can't really know an organism's genotype unless it's what's called true breeding. You know that it always breeds the same way. That's generally more true in plants than it is in animals. And remember, there's two different alleles that create the phenotype. So even though you see like purple flowers in peas, those purple flowers could be two different alleles, a dominant and recessive, or it could be two dominant alleles. So just because we can see a phenotype doesn't necessarily mean we know the genotype. It could be a dominant and recessive or two dominants. If we see a trait that's only possible with two recessives, we can be pretty sure about the genotype. But in most cases, we don't know the genotype. And an individual's genotype is made of the what? Made of alleles inherited from both parents. Coco's genotype contains the alleles for traits we can see. So black hair, green eyes, short hair, long hair, those are all phenotypes that we can see. The genotype would be the black hair allele, or the green eye allele, or the short hair allele, or the long tail allele. There's another factor that affects phenotype, the environment. For example, if Coco is fed too much, Coco will get fat. Being fat is a trait we can observe and is part of his phenotype, but not necessarily his genotype. So here's the next key concept. An individual's phenotype depends both on the genotype and the environment. Which of the following statements about phenotypes and genotypes is false? Phenotype can be changed by the environment. Genotype affects phenotype by providing the instructions for making proteins. Phenotype is an organism's visible characteristics. An organism's phenotype is made up only of genes and alleles. I'll let you decide. One of the most important phenotypes, or just an important phenotype, is whether an individual is male or female. This depends on the sex chromosomes. The two sex chromosomes are called X or Y. There are genes on those chromosomes, sections of a chromosome that do a specific job. That specific chunk of DNA on a chromosome is called a gene. That specific chunk of DNA does a specific job. Genes are just chunks of a chromosome, sections of a chromosome that do a specific job. So females have homologous chromosomes. They have two X's. So they can have different alleles on those two X's, but they are the same chromosome. Male are non-homologous. They have different genes. They're not just different alleles, they're different genes because these are not the same chromosomes. The Y chromosome contains different information than the X chromosome. So males have that last pair of chromosomes is non-homologous. And you can also see the Y is much smaller. It contains less information than the X chromosome. The sex chromosomes and Coco's other chromosomes are in the nucleus of his cells. As Coco grows, his cells need to divide to make more cells. Cells that make up the body are called somatic cells. So your nose, your liver, your eyeballs, your toes, they're all somatic cells. And I like to think of mitosis goes on in your toes. Toes are boring, they're everyday things, and they just make mitosis makes more cells for your toes, your nose, your eyeballs, your liver, your skin, your muscles, your bones. Mitosis is just for reproducing copies, exact copies of your cells. Your somatic cells. These cells divide by a process called mitosis. A key concept here is mitosis makes two daughter cells that are identical. They have the same number of chromosomes, they have the same alleles as the parent cell. This means that the genotype of an individual does not change as it grows. So that key concept is down here in number 11. Mitosis makes two daughter cells that are identical to the parent cell. You can fill in the blanks from this key concept right here. Sex chromosomes are important because they determine the sex of the organism. Are you male or are you female? Now, if you're human, you don't get to choose your sex chromosomes. Your gender you get to choose, but your sex chromosomes are something you're born with. If you're biologically female, you can choose your gender to be male, but biological sex and gender are different. Let's continue here. So the cells of the body, the somatic cells, divide by mitosis. This gives genetically identical daughter cells. The somatic cells are not used to pass on genes from parents to children. This is done by germ cells. So our next question is, how do germ cells divide? That's meiosis. That's what we're studying today. Meiosis is important because it makes the sex cells we use and cats use and hippopotamuses use to reproduce. Like somatic cells, germ cells also have two sets of chromosomes. A cell that has two sets of chromosomes is called diploid. Di means two and ploid means sets of chromosomes. So if you're diploid, you have two sets of chromosomes. All your body cells, except your reproductive cells, are diploid. So your eyeballs, your bones, your muscles, your skin, all of those cells have two sets of chromosomes that are homologous. One came from your mom, one came from your dad. They might have different alleles, but they're the same genes. They're two sets of chromosomes that contain the same genes. Germ means seed, and germ cells are the seeds that make other cells are called gametes. Gametes are eggs and sperm in vertebrate animals. Each germ cell can make 4 gametes by a process called meiosis. Plants also do meiosis. Their germ cells are a little bit different, but the ideas are much the same. Female gametes are called egg cells. Male gametes are called sperm cells. When egg and sperm get together, you get a new organism. Gametes are sex cells that are only used for reproduction. So you only do meiosis if you're making reproductive cells. You don't do meiosis in your toes or your eyeballs or your liver or your muscles or your skin or your bones. That's all mitosis. Meiosis is only for making eggs and sperm. So sperm and egg cells contain one set of chromosomes, so they're haploid. Hap means one and ploid means sets of chromosomes. The reason they only each have one is so when they get together to make a single cell, the egg and sperm will get together to make one single cell that starts the organism. They have one copy from mom, one copy from dad, so they have 2 copies. But you have to get down to a single copy in a gamete, so when they get together, they only have 2 and not 4. The germ cell has 2 sets of chromosomes, and the 4 gametes will each have 1 set of chromosomes. To have enough DNA for each gamete, the DNA in the germ cell must be, I'll let you decide. For simplicity, only 2 of the 19 chromosome pairs will be shown in this cat cell. Before meiosis, the germ cell must prepare to divide. It doubles its DNA and makes more organelles and cytoplasm. This stage is called interphase. So we can see that each of the chromosomes got doubled, and it's ready to start meiosis. In the meantime, let's go back and look at our lab so far. Germ cells mean seed, and germ cells are the seeds that make other cells called. You can get some of these answers from the screenshot right here. You picked the correct answer to number 13. And we're working on the key concepts for 14 and 15. So sometimes DNA is not copied correctly. This creates a new allele. When this happens, it's called a mutation. Mutations during interphase can also happen in mitosis. So mutations are pretty common. Sometimes they harm the organism, sometimes they help the organism, sometimes they're neutral. So we're going to copy our DNA. There's a mutation right there. One of those base pairs in the DNA messed up. It wasn't matched correctly or it got switched out. There's lots of different mutations. We'll be studying that. This particular point mutation changed the orange fur allele to the black fur allele. After replication, each chromosome is attached to an identical copy of itself. Well, the 2 identical chromosomes are attached. They're called sister chromatids and are held together by proteins at a region called the centromere. Now, sister chromatids are different than homologous chromosomes. These 2 are homologous chromosomes, and these 2 are homologous chromosomes because they contain the same genes, but they're not exactly. Sister chromatids contain exactly the same information. They have the same alleles because they're copies. This one you got from mom, this one you got from dad, and then you double those to get sister chromatids. Mom and dad's chromosomes are not the same. They have the same genes, but not the same alleles. But when you copy them to make sister chromatids, these 2 are exactly the same. The pink and blue are not exactly the same. They're homologous. So here's the next key concept. Sister chromatids are different from homologous chromosomes. Sister chromatids are identical, same genes, same alleles. Homologous chromosomes just have the same genes, but maybe have different alleles. So there's 14 and 15. We'll continue this lab in the next recording. Thanks so much for watching.